Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Superintendent Evans. On behalf of the police department, obviously we were very proud of our efforts from the beginning at the Thorn site when we had such terrible tragedy. Obviously, our hearts and prayers still go out to the victims. Martin Richards, the 8-year-old, the 2 young females killed, and Officer Collier, who lost his life. So to begin things, obviously, our hearts and prayers still go out to the families and the victims in that case. Because of such an incident and the tragedy, throughout this incident, we had the motivation into the for not only the bombings, but also for sort of wreaking havoc on the city of Boston. All 3 of us have run the Boston Marathon. We know how special that day is. It's probably the best day in Boston. And for anyone to attack the city the way they did, we all took it personal. And I think that's the motivation that kept us throughout this event. From Monday on, when you've seen officers running to the bomb site and triaging people and giving first aid, we never let up our desire to catch who's responsible here. And I think you right up until Friday evening. We were out there from 1 o'clock in the morning till 6:45 when we were very fortunate to have a resident go into the back of his home and find someone bloody and in the boat in back of his house. We had been hanging in the neighborhood all day long. We were getting tips all day long. The Boston police officers and our partners were checking calls all day long. Come 6 o'clock at night, we were pretty tired. We were going to multiple calls throughout the day, and just at 6 o'clock, when the ban was removed, we continued to search. I contacted one of my captains, Captain John Davin, while we were searching to see how the progress of our search was going. He indicated to me, "Boss, I need 15 more minutes to cover the streets that we have been assigned." So with me at that time was Lieutenant Myrna and Lieutenant O'Connor. So the Boston police continued to search while some of the other, well after, the governor had removed the ban. So our problem at that time is residents were coming out, and the officers were asking, how should we deal with the residents? And we made it clear, as courteous and as professional as possible, yet getting the job done. So 15 minutes went by. I called Captain John Davin, who was in charge of one of the quadrants, and I said, "John, how you doing?" He says, "Boss, give me 5 more minutes." It was at that point when we were standing at the corner of the original site. All officers were still out there searching when we heard, we were standing next to the Watertown officer, we heard that the call come in, and he told us, he didn't hold us, we heard him say, "We just got a call for a man in the back of a house on a boat." We hopped into our car, we followed the Watertown officer down because he was more familiar with the area, and at that time, we hopped out of the car and we all got into the driveway and we set up a perimeter around that boat. And that's how we got to the scene.
Questions, guys? Were there shots fired when you entered the driveway?
No, there wasn't shots fired when we entered the driveway. Again, we secured the perimeter around the boat. At one point, I was calling out that we had plenty of help. I didn't need any more help. Obviously, that was quite a highly stressed type situation where we were having all kinds of help running in when they were hearing us on the radio. But I continue to stress, we're all set. All we need is a tactical team to come in. We were holding the scene because with any hostage situation or crisis situation, time is on our side. We can wait this fellow out. We can, you know, our goal is to bring in a negotiator, bring in a tactical team, and try to bring them out safely without anyone being injured. During that time, shots rang out from behind the house. We were holding the perimeter in the front of the house. At that time, shots rang out, multiple shots, and at that point, again, I was screaming for everyone to hold their fire at that point, just to calm the situation down. And at that point, we were in a holding scenario where we were waiting for tactical teams to come in, which I had originally called for.
So how many of there were you while you were waiting for that tactical team to come when you heard those shots?
When we originally started, there were the three of us, one Watertown. There were three of us, one Watertown police detective, and then additional officers came from various agencies. Sergeant from Brookline, officers from various federal agencies, and then the Massachusetts State Police. So we had enough officers on the perimeter. Lieutenant O'Connor and I quickly set up officers in strategic positions along the perimeter as the superintendent took control of the entire incident.
Your thoughts when the shots were fired, were you worried they were coming from within that boat?
There's always a possibility, just, you know, that there were shots coming from the boat, and my thoughts was the safety of the officers and the citizens that were still in the area.
Were there shots coming from the boat?
That's part of the investigation.
Did you have anything to do with those shots that were being fired?
No.
Was it an exchange of fire? Was it a shootout at the boat?
Again, that's under investigation. You know, as soon as we had gotten there, we detected movement in the boat. We could see a hand up poking at the top, whether they were trying to, you know, poke a hole in the top, or if they had a handgun. We weren't sure. You know, but clearly from everybody's vantage point, we could see whoever was in that boat was poking at that top. And so, you know, that's, again, when we got there, we clearly knew that there was movement in the boat. Sometime after this, probably 10 or 15 minutes after, the state police brought in their helicopter, and they were very helpful as far as the positioning of the boat, the body on the boat. But, you know, within a few minutes, we knew we had someone in the boat.
Were those shots were fired before the helicopter came in?
I believe so, yes. Within the first 5 or 10 minutes, those shots pretty much were fired. Basically, like I said, it wasn't long before we were there that we could see the movement in the boat.
Was the boat in the perimeter that had been sealed off that day, or outside of the perimeter?
I believe at this time it was inside the 20-block perimeter.
So if it was within the 20-block perimeter, was that boat ever searched?
Not to my knowledge. Again, different agencies were assigned different quadrants. You know what I mean? We had certain quadrants, other agencies had other quadrants, and, you know, quite frankly, I honestly don't know whose quadrant that was.
How long were you waiting for that tactical team to come in?
Well, the problem you have at a situation like that is you get so many units coming to a scene that sometimes it's very difficult to get the assets in that you want. And we did have problems that night. There were so many officers coming once they heard the call that, unfortunately, some of the egress to that location, as far as getting the tactical team, it was a little bit of a delay. When we were able to move some of the assets, we got them in. So probably, what, 20 minutes or so? Probably 20 minutes.
When you set up your staging area where you're going to stand down until backup comes in, how do you know you're safe if you were to have a suicide vest or an explosive device?
Right.
There?
Well,
how do you make that determination, and how were you feeling at that time when you were?
Well, we had taken cover. You know, we were in a driveway. I was right in front of the house. Officers O'Connor and Bobby here, they were behind cover, so we had cover. I thought we were well protected. Our biggest concern, obviously, was the safety of officers. You know, when you have so many officers show up like that, you worry about crossfire. And that's one of the reasons why when we had a dozen or so officers around the perimeter, we had officers who evacuated the houses nearby, and we had officers up on the second floor of both adjacent houses. So we had great sight and cover on what we had in the boat. It was just a matter of holding till we get the tactical team to come in and try to negotiate him out.
Wasn't the decision the hour before to lift the shelter order, and was that a wrong decision?
I don't want to comment on that. We had, you know, we continued to search out there. We had our quadrants. My captains weren't happy with the fact they hadn't finished their quadrants. So I know from being the commander of the Boston Police on the ground, we weren't going to leave until we had finished our job.
And was that your quadrant? Whose quadrant was it where the boat actually was?
Again, I can't comment on that. And you know, all I know is we were out there, Captain Davin, Deputy O'Rourke, and Deputy Leiden in the back. They were you know, doing their quadrants, and you know, we just knew we hadn't finished ours, and we weren't satisfied leaving until we basically had done what we set out to do. And just remember, I think, you know, we were driven by the tragedy. We all were. And you know, it really impacted us seeing a lot of us witnessed what happened there on Boylston. And a lot of us throughout the week worked 16 to 20 hours a day. Nobody complained. We had a mission. We wanted to catch this guy for what he did, not only to the poor victims, but what he did to our marathon and what he did to our city. And that was the motivation, that when others might have been calling it a day, we weren't calling it a day.
Do you have any indication whether the suspect knew that officers were surrounding the boat where they identified the location?
Oh, he knew, because you know, there was a lot of, you know, a lot of chatter outside. You know, everyone's yelling for help. Everyone's yelling to set up the perimeter. So, you know, it's pretty clear. I think he knew we were there.
And we initiated the negotiations first.
During those negotiations, what was said? Can you tell us, did he
I don't know. Again, you know, as we moved along here, and once things got settled down, the FBI hostage recovery team came in and took over together with myself and Lieutenant Murner and O'Connor. Myself as the incident commander. We work with the FBI hostage recovery team, and if anyone knows them, they're probably the best in the nation. And we, you know, they dictated the tactics they were going to use. Throughout the process, they advised us of what it was going to happen, and it was the FBI hostage recovery team that went in and started the negotiations.
Two questions left. Two questions, please.
Was he armed?
To my knowledge, that's still under investigation.
How did he get out of the boat?
What,
Was he lifted out?
He followed the instructions of the negotiators.
Yeah.
He was, that's part of the negotiation, basically instructing him exactly what he is to do, how he is to surrender and be brought into custody. He followed the instructions of the negotiator.
You were the guys that cuffed him?
No, just so you understand, all right, we handle the command of the overall. We direct the resources at the scene. The FBI hostage response team went in. They're the ones who drew the flashbang. They're the ones throughout the process that sort of handled the tactical. They went in and symbolically they let the MBTA put the cuffs on the suspect because of their fellow officer, who I'm happy to report is doing much better, which makes us, again, as a law enforcement community, feel great that, number one, we got the guy, but also that the MBTA officer is doing much better. But we reached out to the T, and symbolically, after the FBI team had him, symbolically, we let the MBTA put the handcuffs on.
Did he say anything? Did he speak to you once you announced your fight?
Again, the FBI took over the investigation. They're the ones who speak to him. Our job was over. He was in custody. He was, you know, the FBI took control of the investigation. At that point, you know, our main concern was that all our officers were safe and we cleared out of the area. So at that point, the FBI took custody. Our part ended. All we're doing now is, you know, guarding the hospital with, you know, our partners, both the FBI, as well as state police.
Sir, last question, hey, last question right here, sir, last question right here, please.
At that point, had you at any point thought you may not find him today?
Sure. You know, like I said, all of our officers were out there, again, from 1 o'clock in the morning, all right? We were walking around all day long. So we were all tired, thank God, and I have to really reach out to the Watertown residents. They were great. You know, our officers had to use bathrooms. You know, we were getting offered food. I can't say enough about the cooperation of the residents of Watertown, but, you know, we walked, and our officers, as tired as they were, they continued until they were satisfied that what they were assigned to search was completed.
Did
So
you think he'd left the perimeter by that point?
we were frustrated, but you know what? When we got him, there was no greater feeling in the world. I remember we were out front, and right away we all started hugging each other because we had gone through a lot the whole week, if you think of it. A lot of us seen the terrible, you know, the terrible sights on Boylston Street. You know, a lot of us 20-hour days, you know. Then we had President Obama come into town, which, you know, we had to handle. And then right, you know, on the night after handling that, we were all out just after midnight. So we all had a rough week. We were all really emotionally attached to what happened here. So the amount of satisfaction as well as, you know, pride we had, especially myself, on behalf of the commissioner and the chief, of the job the Boston Police Department did. All our officers were out there all week. We didn't hear one complaint, and I can't say how much pride I have that it was a great feeling that not only did the tragedy happen on us, but we were responsible for the ultimate arrest. So, you know, that was great closure for us. I'm glad, you know, we happened to be right there when the call came in, and actually we took control of that scene that ended up in the capture of this suspect.
Guys, thank you, that's the last question, we're good. We're gonna close on that note. Thank you for coming, we appreciate your time today. Gentlemen?